G'day everyone, it's 12 o'clock here in Melbourne. I'm really glad you could come along to our partnership webinars with the Department of Education in Victoria. So this is obviously remote learning webinar number 3, OneNote and Class Notebook. So we're going to dive into OneNote and Class Notebook and look at some of the cool things that you can do in that space. My name is Troy Waller. I am a Microsoft Learning Delivery Specialist, which is just a fancy way of saying I am a former teacher. Spent most of my time in primary. I did do some time in secondary and also some time lecturing at a university level as well. So my job is to go around Australia, mostly southern states, and turn teachers on to the amazing things that we are doing with Microsoft Education. What we're trying to do with this series of webinars is to help you with your remote learning and help you being able to reach the kids, via technology, or reach your students via technology. Just let you know, I am work from home, so I have dogs, I have kids, I have planes flying over the top, so you're going to hear lots of noises, and it's going to show you pretty quick that this is not television, not even close. First thing I want to draw your attention to, though, is this website here. This is Australian based, it's national, so it's not just for Victoria, aka.ms/Microsoft Remote Learning. That is your one-stop shop for everything that we are publishing from Australia around remote learning for you. So again, it doesn't matter if you're department or if you're independent school, Catholic school from another state, this is definitely the website for you. So go in and have a look at that. Let's have a look at where we're going to go today with this workshop, with this webinar. We're going to look first at the Microsoft Educator community. The Microsoft Educator community is your online portal for professional development. Then we're going to look at OneNote and where we can get it and what it looks like and what devices it works on. And then we're going to break down OneNote. So looking at the anatomy of OneNote and how it's structured, and then we'll look at its features and some of the things that we can do. Then we're going to jump into Class Notebook and play around with that. And then what I'm going to do towards the end is I want to take you into Teams. This is not a Teams webinar. The Teams webinar was our first webinar, and there are recordings available of that, and I'll show you how to access those later today. But I want to show you how OneNote works inside Teams and how Class Notebook works inside Teams. Then next steps, and then we'll go with Q&A. I'm going to try to remember to stop now and again to take you to field some questions. I do ask that the questions that you we're going to field are actually going to be questions about sort of what we're covering, and hopefully not too many sort of tangent questions. On that note, though, I do want to open up to Clara, and Clara is also on the call, and she's going to be fielding your questions. So why don't you say g'day, Clara? Come off mute and say g'day.
Hi everyone, my name is Clara. I'll be helping everyone in the Q&A section. So I'm just got a couple of questions as well at the moment. So essentially I work out from the store, which is located in Pitt Street in Sydney, New South Wales. So essentially my role there is to help execute and plan events in the store, as well as hold our off-site volunteering opportunities for the employees as well. But I'll be helping Troy with the Q&A section, so let me know if you've got any questions.
Wonderful, yeah, and I'm really glad that Clara was able to come along and help, because with the closing of the store, it was really great that Microsoft were able to help those store employees with doing some great stuff for us online, which is awesome. All right, so this is our Microsoft Educator Center, and that website there is education.microsoft.com. Again, education.microsoft.com. Please notice there's no www before that. The Microsoft Educator Center, this is your professional development portal, your online professional development portal for all things related to Microsoft in education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into the website, which is here. So again, education.microsoft.com, and you can see that it's broken down into a few different sections. Now, the first one is, individual courses. So when I click on Browse Courses, what it will do for me there is it will actually show me the courses that I haven't started, the courses that I'm partway through, and then further down the courses that I've completed. But if I was to look for courses specifically around OneNote, if I type in OneNote, you'll see what it'll do is it'll bring up all the courses that are somehow connected to OneNote. And I do want to draw your attention to this one here called Getting Started with OneNote, and another one over here called Introduction to OneNote, and an even better one, OneNote Class Notebook. So those are the three courses that are focusing around what we're going to look at today. There's also another really good course over here, Independent Learning with Maths Tools, around OneNote. So if you're a maths teacher, you can get in and explore that. Okay, so we can look for courses, but we might want to look for courses more from a pedagogical focus, right? So we might want to look at something like assessment, right? And what happens here is now all the courses that are related to assessment or connected somehow to assessment will come up. So the Microsoft Educator courses are not just about product. They are definitely they definitely have a pedagogical lens, and we come at this from an educator perspective. Now, for that reason, what that means is any courses that you do through this are recognised in the sense that they meet the AITSL standards. So they're recognised by the VIT, the Victorian the VIT down here in Victoria, the TRB in South Australia, for example, will recognise. So those teacher registration boards. So I suggest that you create an account by signing in, just using your school email address and password, and then any workshops, any online trainings that you do will actually be recorded in here. For those of you who need some sort of proof that you attended today, please keep your Eventbrite notification, and that will actually meet the requirements that you were here today. Okay, so there's no certificates as such. Anyway, so that's our courses. Now, the other thing we've got is what's called learning paths. So when we look for learning paths, so for example, if I was to look, again, same kind of thing, if I was to type in OneNote, I want to draw your attention to a very cool tool, a very cool series of workshops here, OneNote Teacher Academy. So what we do with our learning paths is we group courses, and they go in a linear fashion, one after the other, one building on the one after, before, etc. So again, go in and have a look at that one in particular, but I'll remind you about that at the end of our workshop. Okay, coming back to our slides. Now, actually, you know what I might do? I might stop there, Clara, and just see if is there any questions about the Educator Centre so far?
Hi, Troy. No, not at the moment. We did have a few people say that there is a really loud echo or feedback through their end. For me, particular, I don't have that echo. Just wanting to see if that was an issue that you've experienced.
Yeah, I'm not getting anything on my end either, but I'll turn my own volume down. Hopefully that's going to help people, but we'll see how we go.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
So OneNote is available right across all your devices, all right? So whether you've got an iPhone, an iPad, a Mac, whether you've got an Android device, Windows device, and look at that, there's an old one, Windows Phone. But regardless of what device you have, you're going to find that there will be a OneNote app. But I want you to remember, please, that not all features are available on all platforms, right? So you're going to have a very different experience OneNote on your iPhone than you will on OneNote on a Mac or OneNote on a PC. The best experience you're going to get is on a PC because it's a Windows device and that's you know, it's a Windows tool. But I don't want to downplay the fact that you get a great experience on your Mac. You get a great experience on your iPad as well. But please remember that as we demo today, I'm going to be coming at it from a Windows 10 perspective, and you may find some of these features aren't available on your platform. The other thing I want to talk about is for those PC users. So if you're on a Windows 10 machine, there are two versions of OneNote that you can access. There's OneNote, the app, which is the top one there, and then there's OneNote 2016, which is the older version. Now, the older version is not being retired as yet. It will one day, but when we launched the new one, we had a sort of old school OneNote users that loved 2016, and they wanted to continue to use that. So on some of your machines, if you do a search for OneNote, you're going to see two versions of OneNote come up, and you are welcome to use one, you are welcome to use both. But my advice to you really though is to if you're new to OneNote, is to jump straight into the OneNote app, which again is that first one there with no date after it, and that is the version that we're going to explore today. The other thing is we've got OneNote Online. So that lives in Office 365 in the cloud. We'll have a little bit of a look at that today as well. But regardless of whether you're on a PC or a Mac, if you've got a browser, you could actually have the same experience. So it's a really good lowest common denominator to use when you're dealing with students on all different devices. So you might get some kids that are coming in on their PC, you've got some kids coming on an older version of Windows, you've got some kids coming in on, you know, their 2012 Samsung tablet that used to belong to their mother. No matter what they're using, if they're coming in on a browser, they can use OneNote Online and have a fairly similar experience. So keep that in mind as well, that if you're wanting to introduce this to your students, which hopefully you will, then you can use OneNote Online and be sure that everyone gets the same experience, even though you may be using one of the apps on your more advanced machine. Now, how do we find OneNote in the cloud? Well, we go into office.com. So what we do for office.com, you can see there when you sign in, you're going to come to a page that looks something like this. And how do we sign in? Well, this is a DET webinar, so I do want to make sure that our Department of Education people can sign in, and that's easily done using your TO number at education.vic.gov.au. So those of you that are in the department, you know what that means when I talk about your TO number. So, you know, 0919 or whatever your number happens to be, you go ahead and you type that in there with education.vic.gov.au. And then you use your regular EduPass password. For the rest of us from other schools, whether we're Catholic, independent, or from interstate, you're just going to use whatever your normal email address is. More than likely, it's just your school email address with your regular password. Some department schools use their own Office 365 tenant, which means that they may have, instead of using an EduMail password, they may use a different, an EduMail email address, they may use a different one. All right, so it may be at Blackburn High School or whatever it is. Try signing in with that first. If that doesn't work, then use your TO at education.vic.gov.au. All right, so that's all the information I need to give you about signing in and how to find us online at office.com. So let's talk now about the anatomy of a OneNote and what OneNotes are based on and how they're designed. And that is basically the idea of a ring binder, all right? Whether it's a 3-ring binder or a 2-ring binder, doesn't really matter. But the idea of these lever arch folders that we open up, we have these colored inserts that sit on the inside of those folders, and in between those colored inserts we have pages, and that's the way that we use these, right? Once upon a time, these might have sat right across your desk or a shelf at work, probably still do, and you would go in there and you would know that the different folders had different contents, and then you'd actually divide them up like that. Well, we do the same thing with OneNote, and let me take you in and show you what I mean. Me, I'll get there. All right, so when we have OneNote, we actually have what are called notebooks. All right, so you can see here that I've got a series of notebooks, okay, series of notebooks like that, and they live down here. And then inside each notebook, I have got these colored dividers, okay, and inside each of these colored dividers, I have got individual pages. Now, in this case, I might actually try and show you something that's actually got something in it. Here we go. So you can see all my colored dividers, and inside I've got 3 different pages inside here. All right, so if I'm looking for something, I would know I would go into my Year 12 Psychology notebook, I would come down into my Research Methods tab, and here are my individual pages. Now, the thing that's different about OneNote to something like Microsoft Word, for example, is that these pages, they're not set as an A4. Okay, or an A3. I want you to think of them more as a piece of butcher's paper, okay? More like a slide inside PowerPoint, or for those of you that used to use Publisher, it's just that sort of that template. But the difference is it goes on forever, all right? So it's pretty much limitless in terms of the size, and we can put things on there. And we don't have to open those files every time we click on it. We just would click on a page and bang, that page is there waiting for us, all right? So again, we've got our notebooks, which sit like this. Then we click on our notebooks, we've got sections, and inside of each section, we've got individual pages. All right, I hope that makes sense. All right, let's keep moving. So when we come into our OneNote page, into our OneNote notebook, and let me just bring us into one here. All right, so when we come in, we've got these tabs across the top. So we've got our home tab here, all right, and our home tab has all our formatting. Okay, so it looks a lot like Microsoft Word, and if you're used to using Word or even Google Docs, you're used to seeing the formatting things like this. Okay, but you can see across here I can change my font size. I've got bold, italic, and underline. I can highlight. I can change my font color. I've got my favorite format painter and other things in there as well. All right, but it's very, very simple. It's not a word processing tool as such, even though it has sort of word processing like features. Now, what I've done here is I've just clicked Add Page because I've created a new page, and I just want to show you how some of these features might work. So I'm going to show you Dictate first. Now, I'm hoping this is going to work because I'm already using my microphone to deliver this, so it may not work, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. But before I dictate, I just want to show you I can set all these different languages. All right, so OneNote will actually recognize different accents and different languages. So in this case, I'm going to go to Australia here. And then when I click on Dictate, I have to wait for the little red light to come on, and then I start to speak. So as I start to speak, there may be a bit of a lag, but you're going to see I can dictate straight into my page, full stop, new line. It may take a moment to catch up, but after a little while, you're going to see that it does in fact catch up, full stop. So as you can see, as I dictate, I do need to punctuate, comma, and I can open quote, say things, close quote, etc. All right, so that's Dictate. So Dictate's very cool, and Dictate is in the online version as well as the Windows version, so you can get in there and have a bit of a play with that. But let's keep moving. So the other thing that we have, and I'll just come down back into my brain structure page here, and I'll just make that. Okay, so you can see here that what I've got is I've got the ability to throw in a table. I've got the ability to insert files. So those of you that have done this with Microsoft Word before, you know you can actually embed a full working copy of your file. The other thing that we have is we have the ability to embed a printout. And what I mean by that is instead of embedding the file, you can see that I've done that with this one here. I've actually put in a copy of the entire a copy of the printed file. So excuse me, I'm just going to bring that across for you. So what I've done is I've actually printed a PDF or printed a Word document straight onto the page because we're moving away from printing. The idea of OneNote is that we're in a paperless environment, but I can print directly onto the page and then I can type over the top or write over the top, etc. I can embed pictures. Okay, so from files from my PC camera and also from online. So it'll take me into Bing and I can insert online pictures. I can insert video. Okay, so if I've got a link there, I can throw that in. So a YouTube clip or something like that. I can embed links. I can record audio. I'm going to give you a bit of a demo of that later, but I can record audio directly from my microphone now straight into my page. It'll collate details and connect with Outlook. I've got the ability to throw in symbols, equations, the maths feature I'm going to show you a little bit later that will, as you can see there, it'll solve and graph maths equations. We've got stickers, so I can actually throw stickers in for my students and I can customize those, which is really nice. Researcher is something I want to draw your attention to because what Researcher does, using Bing, it will actually take you to citable sources and reputable sources. So students don't need to jump outside of OneNote to do research, but we also know that by using Researcher, it will make sure that they only go to reputable, citable sources. And the other one, of course, is Microsoft Forms. So I can actually embed forms inside here as well. I've got a forms workshop coming up in a few days. So come back and I'll tell you all about the awesome things you can do with forms as well. I've got the ability to draw inside here. So you can see that I've got different pens, I've got highlighters, pencils, etc. If you don't have a stylus enabled device, you can draw with touch, but you just need to make sure that you do have at least a touch enabled device. I've got the ability to create shapes and draw shapes onto my page. Ink to shape is really nice. What ink to shape does is if I have trouble drawing shapes, it will actually fix that shape up for me, and it'll make it sort of perfect. And what I mean by that is if I turn ink to shape on, I'm just going to come back down here. I'm just going to add a page so I don't mess up other people's work. If I turn on my, excuse me, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to drag this down into my touch area, and then I'm just going to have to change this over. Excuse me a moment. This is, as I told you, this was live. Okay, so there you go. So now what happens if I start to draw, now you can't see me, but I've actually got a stylus in my hand. If I was to draw a triangle or a rectangle, you see I'm not very good at those sort of things, but when I click on this ink to shape button, now when I draw a triangle, it actually makes, so this is really good for your littlies. So keep that in mind when you're using them, and remember when you're using it with them. And remember, we can draw with touch too, so they can be doing that on an iPad or doing that on their touch-enabled device. The other thing that we've got in here is we've got a ruler, and the ruler helps us to measure angles, and the ruler also helps us to draw straight lines, and I tend to have trouble with that as well. So there you go. So that's that. The other thing that we've got in here is we've got the View tab. Now the View tab allows us to do some really cool things. Actually, I'm just going to turn that ruler off. The View tabs allows us to do some really cool things. Immersive Reader, I'm going to have to get you to push pause on that one and come into my upcoming workshop on inclusivity. I'll take you right through the awesome things that can do. But you can do things like change the page color. Okay, so kids can actually be, you think about as teachers collecting all those, A3 and A4 colored paper that we use to get students into. We can save a lot of money by being able to just change the page color like that, right? The other thing we can do though is we can rule lines. So this is really important because what that means now with a stylus enabled device, if I just make that a little bit bigger, I can now write on my page and treat it exactly like a notebook, right? There's no more losing of my notebook, etc. It's all there for me. I've got the ability to translate, okay? So I can translate English to other languages and other languages back to English. That's all happening inside there, which is pretty cool. All right, the other thing I guess I'm just gonna drag, if you don't mind, sorry, I'm just gonna drag this one back up to here. And forgive me a moment, I'm just going to change that back. You get to see behind the scenes, everyone. This is what it looks like doing a live broadcast. Okay, so there we go. So I'm just having to jump backwards and forwards to show you bits and pieces. It can be a little bit tough. All right, so what I might do is I might actually stop there and throw it open to questions, Clara. So any questions we've had about what we've covered so far?
Yes, so when you were demoing Researcher, was there a possibility that you could create a citation for
Yes, totally, exactly right. So, and good question. So when you grab something from Researcher, it automatically creates a citation for you and throws that onto the page as well, and it'll also keep it as a reference for you. So definitely, great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Also, how do you divide pages into multiple areas? Laurie has found that she can only include tables, but she hasn't found a way to wrap text or add text next to pictures or tables.
Not quite sure what that question was, but let's have a look back up here. So when I'll just drop out of that. So when you're on OneNote and you want to divide the page up, yeah, I think the best thing to do would actually to create a table. and then you can actually, like if we throw a table and you can actually maximize those sizes, that would probably be the best way to do it. Any other questions, Clara?
No, for now, everything's good.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so let's keep going and let's jump into our next little section of my presentation, and that is looking at OneNote Class Notebook, and hopefully this is what most of you have come along to see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into my Year 12 OneNote, and I'm going to take you through, I'm going to explain to you about OneNote Class Notebook and how it works. I'm just going to come back here to this Brain Structure Lab here. So the thing about Class Notebook is Class Notebook gives us 3 major sections. Well, actually, it's 4 major sections, and the 4 major sections are a collaboration space, which is here, okay? And I'm just going to click on this. So as it says here, the collaboration space is open to everyone in the class, and all class members can read and write on anything in this notebook. Okay, so it's a space inside the OneNote Class Notebook where teachers and students can come and collaborate. Now, as a teacher, I can set permissions on that collaboration space. All right, so I can lock students in and out of different spaces. I can differentiate. You can see there I've got all these different groups, and I can decide which students are allowed in which of those sections. Excuse me. So that's our collaboration space. Now, our content library is where I, as a teacher, can keep all my learnings. Okay, so I can keep all my learning engagements, all my lessons, etc. The students have read-only access to this. I, as a teacher, have read and write. And as a matter of fact, as a teacher, I have read and write access to every part of the class notebook. But the students have read-only access. So that means that they can come in here. I can teach from here. They can grab copies of things that they're interested in and take it back into their own section, but they can't make any changes. They can't destroy my work. All right, and you can see here in the content library, what I've done here is I've actually put in things like a handout. I've put in full color pictures. I've actually started to ink on top of that as I've maybe given them a presentation of some sort. I've embedded a YouTube clip. I've set tasks for them. I've embedded an Excel spreadsheet, all kinds of things happening inside here. So my lesson area, my content library is actually really, really rich with what I can do: text, video, audio, etc. All right, so that's my content library. Now, the next thing I have is I have my teacher only section. Now, my teacher only section is, as it says, just for me, just for the teacher. The children don't even know it exists. So it's a private space for my material, so I can build things and then be pushing that out to my students when I'm ready, whether I want to drop it into the content library, the collaboration space, or into the student areas. All right, so that's really cool, and I'll show you how to switch that on because it's not on by default. The last thing we have, you can see I've got all my students. All right, so these are all my students. Each one of them have their own sections that are inside, which I have created. So I've set that as a template when I created a class notebook. All right, and each one of them have the same spaces. All right, so it means that I can push things out and I can have that imitating my content library or creating other sections for them. Inside this area, Dorina, for example, here, she has full read and write access in her own space, okay? But they can't see each other. So in other words, what I'm saying is I, as a teacher, can see all this and see all of them, but the individual students can only see themselves, the content library, and the collaboration space. But what's really cool about this is if I wanted to go in to say, look at Garth and see what Garth was doing, I can go straight into his space, all right, and I can see what he's doing. I could give him verbal feedback using the audio function. I could give him typed feedback, or if I've got a touch and stylus enabled device, I can write over the top of his pages and be giving him feedback. So we can be on that page at the same time. Now, it really depends on the speed of the network, how much of that immediacy we're going to see, but at least knowing in a remote context, we can actually give students that feedback immediately. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. Okay, so we've got Class Notebook here. Now, what I want to share with you though, before I go in and take you through the details of a Class Notebook, I actually want to show you how to create one. All right, so here I am on my Microsoft Office homepage, and you can see here I've got the ability to create a class notebook. Nowadays, we actually suggest that you create a class notebook inside Teams. All right, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But if we did want to create a class notebook, we would click on it here. All right, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a quick demo on how we create a class notebook and what it actually does for you. All right, so I want to create a class notebook. I want to give that a name, so I'm going to call that 2020 7H Biology. And what's going to happen now is it's going to create a collaboration space, a content library, and these student notebooks. Remembering, teacher can edit the content, student can edit the content in collaboration space, but in content library, only the teacher can edit the content. And then in the student notebook, the student can only see themselves. I click on next. This is when I would start to add other people to the notebook. So I could add teachers or I could add students. And in this case, I'm going to add one of my students here. I'm going to add Stephen Payne. And next thing it does is it asks me what sections do I want to create. All right, so it's very American here that it's got, you know, handouts and quizzes and that kind of stuff. So we can actually rename those. So because this is a biology one, I might call it Unit 1, the brain. Oops, excuse me. Unit 1, the brain, and the second one I might call Unit 2. You can tell I'm not a science teacher. I'm hopeless with those second capital letters, by the way. Unit 2, heart, and on we go. Okay, so I could create all those, and then when I'm ready to go, I hit next, and it will say, this is what I'm going to create for you. Are you ready to go? And I would say yes, and then I would create that. All right, but in this case, we're not going to go ahead with that because I want to show you obviously the one that I've created earlier, which is the Year 12 Psychology. And you can see here I'm now in the online version. So I've got my collaboration space, my content library, my teacher only section, etc. But what I want to show you is when I click on Class Notebook, the Class Notebook tab up the top, I get some really cool features and things that I can do. Now, the first thing I can do is I can distribute a page. So for example, if I was in my content library, now you can see it's a little bit slower in the online version, so you're going to get more, going to get quicker experience in the app. But if I was here in memory systems, which is one of my units, and I had this page, the models of memory, which I have built out and I want to send to all my students, what I would do is I would click here on distribute page. Do I want to send it to everyone? Do I want to send it to just individuals? Do I want to send it to other groups, or do I want to send that across class notebooks because I may have, 3 or 4 different biology or psychology classes that I teach, and I know that everybody needs that. So it's really cool that I can do that. But what I would do is I would distribute page. And then it's going to ask me, where do you want to distribute this to? Because remember, those students all have the same sections. So in this case, I might want to distribute that to class notes, or I might want to go down to memory system. I click distribute, and then I wait a few moments and it will appear in everybody's space. For the sake of time, I'm not going to show you how that works or what it looks like, but trust me, it's great. Now, I might want to distribute a new section. All right, so I want to create one of these new sections down in my student area. I can do that as well. I may have a page that I'm working on here in my teacher only section, or maybe there's a student section that I want to copy to the content library. I can do it through there. Now, another one that I want to share with you, which is really cool, is what we call review student work. So if I've set an assignment, for example, and I may have done that through Teams, or I may have done it directly through OneNote. But when I click on review student work, I may say I want to look at everybody's homework. That's the section I'm going to go into because I know that the page is living in there. I might have set a template out to them using that distribute page. And I'm going to look at their brain structure essay. I click next. And now what happens is I have the ability to lock the page, okay, because it might be some sort of assignment where there was a deadline and I can lock that page after that time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my students And each one of my students, as I click on this, it takes me directly to their brain structure essay. So instead of having to go out and find that student and come into the sections and the pages, this will take me directly to that page. So inside here, I can start to give them direct feedback. All right, so I'm going to come back to that in a moment though, because I want to show you a few other things you can do in Class Notebook before I show you some of the ways that I could give feedback. The other thing I've got over here is what's called, well, I can add students, I can remove students, I can create class notebooks, which we just had a look at a moment ago. But manage notebooks is really important because when we come into the manage notebook section, this is sort of that back end, right? The back end where I can do have some control. I could rename my students' sections. Okay, so there might be a typo, or maybe we're changing the unit or something like that. I can rename that and that will reflect into all my students at once. That teacher only section group, if you've never enabled it, you'll have the ability to enable it. You can see this one has already been enabled. If you don't do that, you won't have your own teacher only section. I can lock the collaboration space because maybe at the end of the day there's some work in there. I don't want some student going home getting upset and you know, deleting everybody's work, so I can do that. Now for collaboration space permissions, I can actually set permissions. This is what we talked about before, and I can have different students able to go into different sections, right? So I'm just a bit slow to load, you'll have to forgive me for that. But this is where I get that control to decide who's available, who's able to go into what groups, and I can differentiate, etc. That's a bit slow, so forgive me for that because I do have, I am using my home internet, so I'm just gonna jump out of that. Parent and guardian links, if you're in an independent or Catholic school, you may have the ability to do that. I know that in the department at the moment that's actually closed, it's been disabled, but what parent and guardian links lets me do is to send a link to the student notebook directly to the parents. They get a read-only link. I can send it for individual students or for all students. So it will create links for every one of those students' private notebooks, and then I would send them individually out to the parents. I can also send a link directly to my content library so parents can see what the kids are learning. All right. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now is I might actually stop. Before I take you in and show you some of the cool things you can do with feedback, I might actually stop and see if there's any questions. How are we going, Clara?
I'm going good. So we did have a couple of questions based on dictation. Is there a possibility to dictate in a different language and also to embed a language into dictate? And was there an ability to turn the translator feature off? It was a concern on a language teacher. Okay,
sure. So in answer to the first question, are you able to change the language for dictate? Yes, that's what I pointed out before. So you can see there's a whole heap of different languages here that you can dictate into. So go ahead and change that if you want. Sorry about hearing my dog. You can probably hear him moaning in the background. I don't have anyone tied up in my basement. All good. The other thing that you asked was, can you turn the translate feature off? And unfortunately, at this stage, no, you can't. Next question, Clara.
I'm not sure if we've touched base on this, but would you suggest embedding lessons in the content library?
Yeah, so definitely I would put, you know, my master copy into the content library, but then the students can copy those and take it into their own section, or I can distribute a copy of that page into their own section, and then that's somewhere they can actually work and take notes, etc. But I would put the original master copy of my lesson definitely in the content library.
Awesome, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. All right, so what I want to show you now then is I want to show you how, and I'm just going to have to, forgive me, I'm going to have to drag this down to another screen. I want to show you how to give some feedback. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, again, you're just going to have to bear with me, apologies. I'm just going to stop sharing and I'm going to share my first screen. Okay, so I want to go into, let's go into Garth's student section here, and let's have a look at his brain structure essay, which he's been working on here. Now I can maximize enter full screen mode, which will give me a lot more room to work. All right, so you're not stuck on that little area there, but I do want to show you this inside the full document. Now I'm actually taking, you can't see this, but I'm actually taking my stylus in my hand. I'm going to click over here onto draw, and I'm going to make that into a red pen. So I'm going to make that into a red pen. And the other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to click up here into the document, and I'm going to insert an audio recording. Now I'm really hoping that that's actually going to work, because as I said, I'm using the audio for this Teams broadcast, but I might start to give my students some feedback. Oh, look at that. Would you look at that? I've left my ink to shape on. So I might start to say, well, mate, you know, blah, blah, blah. I want to talk to you about this part of your essay, and I might want to, you know, talk about this over here. So instead of having to write all my notes, I can write some notes, but I can leave an audio recording for him. And now when I click on recording and stop, what happens there is when I play that recording back, and you're going to have to forgive me, I'm unable to play it back for you because I can't share my own audio through a Teams live event. You can do it through a Teams meeting, but you can't do it through a Teams live event. But as I hit play, what starts to happen is, I'm really hoping you can hear that. But as the audio plays, it's actually syncing my my writing, my texting directly onto the audio. Okay, sorry, it was a bit hard to talk to you while I was also listening to my voice there. But basically what's happening is it's playing the audio and it's highlighting the things that I have written onto the screen at the same time. Now you may look at that and say, hey, actually, Troy, that doesn't work for me because I don't have a touch and stylus enabled device. But what I want to share with you is you can use a mouse. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that one. You can use a mouse and you can use your highlighter. So I could actually put I'm going to put another recording inside there. And now using my highlighter tool, using my highlighter tool, I could actually start to highlight pieces of text through that using my mouse, and that would be recording in there as well. So you don't need to have a touch and stylus enabled device, but trust me, it's awesome if you do. All right, so that's that little bit there about, excuse me, about feedback. So Clara, have we got any questions that have come up so far before we keep moving?
Yes, good timing. So I had a couple of people reach out in regards to removing a student section. If you could kind of walk us through that, because I did send through a link, but I don't think they've covered that in that link yet.
Oh, okay. So removing a student section, you need to remove the student from the class notebook first. So let me take you in and show you how to do that. I'll just need to reshare my screen. Just give me a moment. Oh, there we go. All right. So what you need to do is you need to remove your student from the class notebook. So going in here, adding and removing your student. And once you have done that, then you can, if it's still appearing in here, then you can actually go in and you can just right click those sections and you can actually remove them manually. But hopefully by removing the student, it will actually remove from there. All right, any other questions?
Heather is just asking if you can show again how to give feedback to students.
You know what, this is recorded. So by all means, go back and watch the recording and we'll make that recording available to you. And I'll get Clara, if you want to share the links for the OneNote help, that would be really helpful as well.
No worries, thank you.
Any more questions?
All good for now.
Okay, cool. All right, so just looking at our time, we've got about 15 minutes left. So let's talk about leveraging Class Notebook in Microsoft Teams, because that's actually where you're going to get the best experience. So what I've got here is I've actually got a class team that I've created. And if you haven't seen our Teams workshop, Teams webinar, please go back to those recordings, jump in, and you'll find out all about that. But when I create a class notebook this way, which is what I did before, it's saved into my personal OneDrive. But when I create a class notebook inside Teams, that is, I just create a team, a class notebook is automatically created, but it now sits in the school or the department shared space rather than my own personal OneDrive space, which means that I can easily pass that on to other people, etc. When I create, you see that the class notebook comes up here. Okay, and the class notebook is created. It's the online version. I can bring that down into the browser or into my app, so I can still have a version of that down on my app, even though it's living in Teams. But you can see here, this class notebook's been created. I've got a collaboration space, I've got a content library, and there's all my students. I don't need to create it like we saw before. I just create a class team. When I create, and again, watch the video of how to do that, then this is automatically created, and the students, as I add them to the team, are automatically added to the class notebook. Now, what's interesting though, is inside my channels, I've got here, like I've got a Chinese channel. Okay, so for my Chinese class, when I click on notes in that Chinese channel, it takes me to a page inside the collaboration space. So we've got Chinese, literacy, maths and science, and they've all got this little note section, which means that the students can access a collaboration space from inside those channels. But what it looks like in the general tab, if I come back up here to class notebook, I can access the whole class notebook from the general tab, from the general channel, excuse me. But when I click on collaboration space, there's all those connections back to those individual channels, which is pretty cool. The other thing that's amazing is assignment integration. Okay, so we can actually bring our OneNotes into our assignments tab. Now, again, please go back and have a look at that video where we talked about Teams, and we've also got another one coming up on assessments fairly soon, so you'll get some more information. But when I create an assignment, and again, I'm going to take us through this quite quickly, but when I create an assignment, I can create a title, I can set a category, you know, whether that's a subject or whatever other category, I can create those whatever I want them to be. I can set instructions, but I can also add resources. And the cool thing about this is I can actually bring in pages from my class notebook and set them as assignments. All right, so I can go back into my class notebook and I can be giving feedback, or I can be giving feedback from inside the assignment feature inside Teams. So I just want to stress that there's some really good integration for that inside of Teams. All right. Any questions so far, or more questions, I should say, Clara?
Yes, Trey, we did have one. Ali tried to distribute a page to her class, but it didn't manage to distribute. Other than internet connectivity, was there another reason why?
Not that I would know of. I would maybe have a look at seeing if there's any sort of support pages around that. But it sounds like to me like it's a glitch. So I'd have another go, and then maybe give it a little bit of time to actually appear in those student sections. The other thing you have to remember is when you're inside the app, you need to remember to sync. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'll just grab my OneNote page, because what happens is sometimes it's actually been distributed, but we haven't synced our OneNote. So you can see here when I've got that there, all right, I've got my Year 12 psychology. When I right click, I've got the ability to sync, and then I can just sync this notebook. And what you may find is the page is actually moved. It's sitting in the cloud, it's sitting in everyone's space, but you need to sync your local app. All right, so you can do that by clicking sync, right clicking the notebook, clicking sync, and the students may need to do that as well. Any more questions, Clara?
Yes, about recordings, where will we be able to find those? Will that be in the aka.ms link that you popped in the beginning?
Yes, and I'll definitely talk about that.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's it for now.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent. So let's talk about next steps, which is what our question was then. So great segue into that. Remember, there was that OneNote Teacher Academy, which is that series of OneNote courses teaching you how to use OneNote, how to use OneNote Class Notebook, and that's available for you at education.microsoft.com. The other one is OneNoteForTeachers.com, which is the OneNote for Education page, which is full of exemplars and all kinds of other bits and pieces. That's definitely your second resource to go into. Again, OneNoteForTeachers.com. Remembering what we've got available for you through Microsoft Remote Learning, so aka.ms, Microsoft Remote Learning, everything that you need to know about the Microsoft platform around remote learning. We have more webinars coming up, so aka.ms/Vic events. Please jump in and register for those. I've got a really good one coming up on assessment. I've got a really good one coming up on inclusivity. I hope you can join me for those. And then also the support documentation. So this is really key. Support.microsoft.com/education. There's a search field there. You can type your questions in and it will actually take you to those documents around support. Now, a question that we just had then was, where do we get the slides and recordings? As soon as they become available, I will upload them. So probably a couple of hours after this today, but it's aka.ms/DET webinars. So that's aka.ms/DET webinars. And what I will do is I will upload the recording, but I will also upload a copy of the slides, which will have all these links in there as well. If you do forget, if you go back to the Vic Events webinar page, that link is there on that page as well. We want you to stay informed, so please jump into our newsletter, Microsoft Educator Center newsletter, aka.ms/MEC newsletter. If you sign up for that, we send out, I think it's once a fortnight or once a month, you get an email from us telling you the latest, greatest things. Lastly, I am available on social media, so if you want to find me, please jump on to Twitter and look me up. I'm at Hoja Saram. If you're looking for me on LinkedIn, just type in Troy Waller Microsoft, I'll come up, or find me as well on Facebook. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 5 or so minutes left. Have we got any more questions, Clara, that we might want to field?
Yes. So if I want to delete a section from each student's individual folder, how can I do this at once rather than doing every student one by one?
Yeah, good question. So let me take you back into the OneNote. I'm going to come back into my class notebook. And can you see here when I clicked on distribute page, and down here it says delete page. Now, once upon a time, I couldn't remove a page that was sent out to everybody. Now I can. I can actually delete those pages that I've sent out. Now, your question I know was about sections, but nevertheless, I can delete individual pages now. What you can do for sections, as I said, going into the managed notebooks, you can rename those sections, but in terms of actually deleting them, really, really hard. So here's my workaround. What you get them to do is you sit in front of your students, right? So this is when we're all back at school, or you can do it through a video call, and I would take them down into the section. I'd say, okay, boys and girls, this is the section that I want you to delete, and then I would actually walk them through it rather than having to go back in and individually removing those. But if you have feedback that you want to if you have feedback that you want to give, like a feature like you just asked for, I want to be able to delete sections like that, just click on this little help and feedback button and suggest a feature. And I know that the OneNote team will be keen to hear from you. Any further questions, Clara?
So another one was the department issued computers don't have a stylus, so really need the best way to give feedback without one. Yep,
so you can just type. So in that case, what you can do, as I said, you can just go in and you can just type your feedback directly onto the student's page like you would, any other kind of marking, but you can still also leave a video recording. And as I said before, use your highlighter tool and be highlighting the pieces of text, and that's the workaround for you. Any other questions, Clara?
Awesome. Just having a look. Was there a way for individual student notebooks to be listed in last name alphabetical order and not first name?
Yes, you do have the option to be able to change that. So we'll try and find the walkthrough for you to be able to do that. But yes, you can change it from first name to last name or last name to first name.
Awesome. And can you delete an audio recording and redo?
Yeah, definitely. It's just easy. If you've got an audio recording that you've made, just click on it. I think I did that a moment ago when I was demoing. So I would just come up here, I would just grab my audio recording like this, hit delete, and then I grab the whole box and delete as well. But that's still going to leave all my my inking, but I can grab the eraser tool and rub those out if I wanted to.
Awesome. And one more was when adding feedback many times, you will be giving the same comment to multiple students. Can written notes be copied and pasted elsewhere?
Yeah, you can copy your written notes. Let me. So you can actually highlight those and copy those and repaste those. So you just use your use your lasso tool, and then you would copy those, Control C, and then Control V, and paste them onto another section.
Thank you. I'm just going through the questions just because we've got a couple. They have slowed down, so just give me a moment.
Oh, sure, no problem.
Or
all right.
Could you possibly? Oh, yes.
Please go on.
Could you possibly put the link up again where they will be able to find the recorded Teams webinar, just so I can shoot that off?
That's it right there. So it's aka.ms/DET webinars, and they're available for you. All right, guys. So I think what we might do is we might actually wrap it up there. I'm just going to share with you the links if you wanted to reach out to me personally through social media. So feel free to connect with me through that. I do use it in only a professional way, so no photos of kids or cats or anything like that. So it's a good way for you to ask questions. But I do want to stress that probably the best place for you to go is this website here, aka.ms/Microsoft Remote Learning. There are real people on there who can answer your questions and talk with you. So that's it from Clara and I. I hope you got something out of this. Again, we will upload this to YouTube, but also I'll make those available to you through that link that I shared earlier. So thanks very much, everyone, and bye for today.